Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about Man of Steel. We're finally moving on from Disney and getting into the DCEU. A cinematic universe that's sort of starting to get better. The reason I'm doing, if you watched any of my past few videos, I talked about how I'm going to do Man of Steel and Birds of Prey today. The reason I'm doing that is because this is how the DCEU started. This is where we're at today. I thought it'd be cool. Who knows if it'll actually be as interesting as I think it's going to be. But we're not here to talk about Birds of Prey just yet. We're here to talk about Man of Steel. Directed by Zack Snyder, it's from 2013, an action-adventure starring Henry Cavill as Clark Kent or Superman, Amy Adams as Lois Lane. I'm going to try this. Anche Trau as Feora, Michael Shannon as General Zod, Diane Lane, who we last saw as Riley's mom in Inside Out, as Martha Kent, Russell Crowe as Jor-El, and Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent. Lawrence Fishburne is also in this. He plays Perry White. I forgot to put him on the list, so I just throw him in now. It's a 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know how I feel about that. On the one hand, I do think this is much better than some of the other movies that are in the DCEU. But I don't think it's as good as some of the things we've gotten in the past 3 years, which would be 2020, 2019, and 2018. You can throw 2017 in there as well, but I think Wonder Woman kind of gets weighed down by Justice League a little bit. With a budget of $225 million, it made $668 million at the box office. That's pretty good. I will give it that it did perform well, and I think being that this was the first live-action Superman since, I want to say 2006 was Superman Returns. So that's kind of that. My biggest issue, because I do have some with this movie, is that, no, I'm not a huge Superman fan. However, I do know that Superman does not kill people. And I won't argue that this is a well-made movie and probably the better of the most of the DCEU films. I also give it that Zack Snyder is a great director, and he has made a fantastic film with solid acting. Henry Cavill gave it his all, even if his performances in later films, such as Justice League or Batman v Superman, it feels like he wasn't really all into it anymore, because he really wasn't. I mean, by all accounts, he is no longer Superman. I don't know if they've replaced him, but I do know he has pretty much said that he is done. Zod is one of the best DCEU villains, but Michael Shannon feels very bored, which is a shame. I really enjoyed him in a show called Waco over on Netflix. Although, really, honestly, looking back on it, he did kind of give the same I'm bored vibes from that as well. So, the relationship between Clark and Lois doesn't exactly work for me. I'm not saying that it's awful. It's still good. It's just, it doesn't 100% work for me. Some part of it feels forced. But it also kind of feels like Cavill and Amy Adams had good chemistry on set. So it could just be the writing of the relationship. I'm not 100% sure where I stand on that. It does feel like it's that writing aspect, but and like I said, their chemistry feels really good, and that's another thing I like, is that this cast has great chemistry together. But it feels forced. I'm just gonna call it from a writing standpoint, it feels forced. And I know Zack Snyder's good at writing human characters, so it's like, what happened here? Why did this feel flopped? Other people don't feel this way. I know I'm probably in a minority on that. Although, looking on it now, the relationship between the two in Batman v Superman feels a little better, but that's a worse film in quality. Oh, and this is probably a good time to mention this. I will not be using any Ultimate Editions or Director's Cuts for any of these movies. So, no Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition. So, no 3 hours of that. No Director's Cut of Suicide Squad to make it quote unquote better. I'm judging these movies on the merit that we got them in theaters. This is what we got in theaters. This is what we got in theaters. That's how I'm judging these. Sorry to you super fans of the Ultimate Edition of Batman v Superman. I don't own it. I own the theatrical release. And I'm not going to go out of my way to try and track down a Ultimate Edition. Although one day I will. And I may do a comparison type deal on those. Because at some point, I want to try and include clips from the movies inside of these videos. But like I said, that's at some point. That's not anytime soon. Alright, moving on. So, as I was saying about the relationship, it doesn't do too much for me, the Clark and Lois relationship, even though it is one of the classic couples from the DC multiverse. Obviously, it's like the grandmother and grandfather of the DC universe. I mean, I've never read these, but I have... Ooh, got my headset wires falling on you guys. I have the first 5 volumes of the Superman comic series from the New 52. I've never read them, so I don't really know what happens in them. One day I'll get around to it. But I also have the first volume of the Golden Age Superman comics from like the early 30s. So again, haven't read them. Eventually I'll get to it. I've read Action Comics #1. I enjoyed it. But I'm not a huge Superman fan. I'm more of a Batman dude myself, but that's just me. Alright. So, as far as the story, it's pretty straightforward. Zod comes to Earth to kill Superman since he's the last son of Krypton, and he wants the codex that Jor-El embedded inside of Kal-El. Therefore, he settles to just turning the Earth into a new Krypton and killing Superman. It's pretty straightforward. I'm sure there's something in there I missed. Like I said, while this is a good film, and I can say that I enjoy it more than most, I'm not a huge Superman fan, therefore I don't really care for this one. I have not watched this movie. Last night was the first time I've watched this movie in probably 4 years. And it just sits there on my shelf staring at me. I'm like, I could watch Man of Steel. Or I could watch Back to the Future, which I've seen 350 times. Or I could watch, I don't know, Iron Man. I've seen that 1,000 times. Why watch a movie I have only seen like 3 or 4 times versus a classic of the superhero genre, Iron Man? Which, we're getting to the MCU in a couple of months. And by a couple, I mean November if I'm still doing this. If not, if at some point I decide that I'm no longer going to do this, I'll just do the whole MCU as like a last hurrah. But the goal is keep going. Keep going, man. Tread on, my friend. That's the goal anyway. As far as the CG, if you follow my Instagram, you know I kind of have a tough relationship with CG. The very first franchise I looked at was the Terminator franchise. That's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 movies spanning over 3 decades, 3 or 4 decades. Started in 1984 and had its last movie last year, Terminator Dark Fate. So, I'm not a huge CG person when I look at it from that standpoint. I mean, Halloween isn't... the horror franchise really is what makes me such a practical effects person. Yeah, you get your Friday Part 3 fake heads that don't look real at all, and it's very noticeable. You notice the wires when the eye pops out. You notice that shit. But knife stabs, you know, they use the fake knives, either the ones that, you know, fold in, or they're sticky and they bend when you stab at somebody, and, you know, you get the fake blood that looks real. That's the kind of stuff I look for. So when you start to switch some of that to CG, because it's easier, and it saves money. I don't know how I feel about it. And in this, I can say that it's really nice and it looks good. Um, Even the giant blue beam superhero trope at the end of the movies, where it seems like every superhero film ends with a giant blue sky beam. Um, yeah, that's okay, but the flying effects I liked. You know, it's not your Christopher Reeves Superman where he lays on a table in front of a green screen with a fan in front of him blowing the cape around. It's not that. It's clearly like stunt actors on wires, but sped up to look better. So, I mean, there are shots where you could assume that Cavill is laying on a table with the fan blowing to pay homage to that whole era where they did that. But at least from my perspective, I can say that this CG looks better than some others that we will look at eventually. Um, and even from Terminator 2, yes, or not Terminator 2, actually, it's a bad example. Great movie, bad example, my bad. Terminator 3, terrible movie. Um, how do I put this? I can say that from a CG standpoint, the practical effects they did in Terminator 3 are outshined by the amount of terrible CGI they tried to use. Yes, it was in its early stages back in 93, but now in 2013, that's 20 years later, assuming that I have the year that Terminator 3 came out correct. I think it might have been 96 or 97. Well, got a laptop, might as well look it up. Terminator. Oh, it's 2003. Okay, so 10 years later. Great. That still works out perfectly. 10 years later, you've got a man flying around fighting a guy, and yeah, there's quick cuts to make the action look faster. And his suit is kind of CG. I mean, they do the same thing with Deadpool. They put the little green dots on him. The same thing with Iron Man to make it look realistic, but it's actually CG. It looks good. It looks realistic. Something from Terminator 3, you look at that and go, what the fuck am I looking at? So, that's just kind of that. So, as I said, the giant blue beam, sky beam trope that we see quite a bit in superhero films, I'm thinking of the Avengers, a Fantastic Four from 2015. We see that all the time, and it just like the others, I don't mind it, and I don't hate it. It's not my favorite trope of all the superhero films. And, you know, they all follow these tropes as, like, their unwritten requirements. It's like, alright, did we do the final battle? Yep. Did we throw in a blue sky beam? You wanted a blue sky beam? Yeah, we have to. Alright, I'll fix that too. So, it's kind of, it's stupid in my book that they have to do this. But they don't have to do it, they choose to do it. But I don't mind it. You know, I know people are like, another sky beam, what the hell? It's like, yeah, who cares? You're not the creator. You know, I didn't write the movie. You want to throw a giant blue sky beam, make it, I don't know, shoot cats out of it? Hey, you know, whatever, you do you. So, as far as the action, though, the action scenes are really nice. Like, I mean, I had Transformers flashbacks from when I watched the Transformers series. Although, looking back on it, that might have been a good example for the CG, but I like the Terminator one better. I got a lot of Transformers flashbacks, especially the way they just throw each other through buildings. There's a lot of quick cuts to make it feel faster. I actually kind of like it. It feels like they even could have. I know. I can't think of what movie it was. There's a movie. I think it was Sinister. It is Sinister. Now that I think about it. Where Ethan Hawke is walking around, and there's these little kids that the family killer kids. They're like they're running around in the background, but they're running super fast. The way that scene was shot was Ethan Hawke, who was the main character in Sinister, was walking slower than normal as the kid characters were running at a normal pace. So it looks like when they shoot it, and they shot it slower, so it looks like in the movie, Ethan Hawke is walking at a normal pace while the kids are running super fast. Maybe that's what they did here, where they made the actors react, slower than usual, kind of like your slow motion back explosion type deal. And then they made the actor for, let's use the plane example. Feora goes into the plane with all the military people and Amy Adams, and she starts just beat the hell out of people. And this is the scene that made me think of this was, she's hitting them, but it's so fast. They're flying through walls. So maybe they reacted slower, like if the fist came and they just kind of like tilted their heads slow, but she did it at a normal pace so that it looks faster, and they shot it at that slower speed more than likely. I don't know that for sure. I didn't look too much into it. Probably should have. But I do enjoy it because it is, especially the Zod versus Superman at the end. I enjoy that because it's two aliens going neck and neck. And speaking of neck to neck, yeah, Superman kills Zod, and I know I mentioned that Superman shouldn't kill people, and yes, he does it to save a family from being murdered by Zod and his eye beams. But man, I feel like he could have just like taken off, maybe like just flew off while he had him in the chokehold, and that way he couldn't kill the family. I don't know. There are options that he could have had instead of killing Zod, especially since Zod is such a good character. And if they were gonna make a Man of Steel 2, like they've been saying for God knows how many years, I would have loved to see more of Zod. Maybe even just in like the original Superman the movie, where he's there but he's not the villain yet. It's Lex Luthor. So when we come to Superman 2, now Zod's the villain. Would have been cool with something like that, but obviously they didn't go for it. And yes, he doesn't kill nearly as many people as Batman in this universe, and we'll talk about that when I talk about Batman v Superman. So as I said, I get Transformers flashbacks watching this. I feel like it's like watching one of those movies where they just throw something through a building, whether it's an alien or themselves or something. It's insane. Very, very insane. So, as far as touching moments, there are a few, especially between Clark and Jonathan Kent, and their relationship. There's a moment at the end that I don't ever remember. I remember seeing where he's standing, little Clark has the cape on, and he puts his arms up in the Superman pose that we're all used to. I remember seeing that in the trailers, but I don't ever remember seeing in the movie. Probably because I didn't watch this far into it. Like I said, not a huge Superman person, so I don't normally watch Superman films. I think I've only ever seen the original Superman once, and even then I was like, oh, this is dated. I probably wouldn't feel that way now, now that I've seen more older movies like Halloween, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, stuff like that. So I'd probably be like, oh, well, maybe it's not as dated as I thought. So I'll eventually go back and look at it. But I really enjoyed Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent's relationship in this. You can see that, yeah, no, he's not your father, but he does care about you as a whole, Clark. And that was there was a scene just before Jonathan's death where he says, Clark says to him, I don't know why I'm even listening to you. You're not my father. And then that's like the last thing he ever said to his father. So it's sad, and you see why in the beginning he's kind of this fisherman hermit who hasn't found his way in life. It's like, well, yeah, that was the last thing I ever said to my dad. What the fuck is wrong with me? So I can give this a 7 out of 10 and not feel bad about it. It has its good moments overshine anything negative I've said about this. They're still there, and they still get judged. But like I said, this is one of the better made DCEU films. And obviously, I mean, it was the first one ever made. And it's directed by the same guy who did Watchmen and 300. Those are two very classic movies that I don't own, so don't expect them anytime soon. Or maybe ever. I don't know. I'm not a huge 300 fan. I'll give it that it's supposedly good, but I've only ever watched the This Is Sparta scene. So, that is that. So I'm going to do another video after this, after I find the review I did for it for Birds of Prey. My opinion about that movie did not change. So if you already saw it on my post on Instagram, you can check out the video and you'll probably know what I'm going to say about it. And it's nothing negative. I don't want you guys to think that. I will say it's not negative at all. But yeah, Man of Steel. Honestly, seriously, go check this movie out if you haven't. I know there's a few people who are like, it's Superman, what do I care? I'm a Batman person. Well, if you're going to watch the DCEU, you kind of have to watch where it began. It's like people who would say the first Iron Man is bad. Get out. You don't have the MCU without Iron Man. You don't have the DCEU, with all of its faults, without Man of Steel. And with that said, I am Luke, and I will see you guys tomorrow with Batman v Superman. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed what you just watched. If you're interested in more of my videos, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon to get notifications every time I upload a video. And also, if you could, just leave a like down below and maybe even consider commenting, telling me things I did good, things I did bad.